Welcome into Journey to the New Earth. I'm Kimberly. I'm so glad you're here today. This is a very, very special conversation, and I'm very pleased and grateful to have Max Lowen back with us today. I hope you stick around for the entire conversation because I can almost guarantee you that this is going to be one of the most eye-opening discussions you've had in a long, long time. And make sure that you put your questions over in the chat because I will be stopping Max from time to time to field your questions. So make sure that this is an opportunity that you take advantage of it to get the questions answered because Max is just an absolute wealth of information on a topic that is still very troubling for people, but I think so very important for us to understand what is going on in the world. It kind of brings it all together. I'd like to introduce Max Lowen. Max, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me, Kimberly. It's always delightful to have a conversation with you. And mind control is possibly the most important topic of our time because it is through this mind control that we're being used to co-create the reality that we're in that's not serving us. So it's a linchpin.
Yeah. And I think that we're going to really expose some great information today. What I'd like to do first, Max, before I kind of set us up for today's conversation, for the people who don't know you or are new to this topic, can you give us a little background on your childhood, how you came to know all this information that has been hidden from the rest of us, where you took that, and what you're doing now?
Sure, yeah. Well, I was myself put through some versions of mind control called satanic ritual abuse and MK Ultra, which people may or may not have heard about. Um, my Italian side of the family was related to what I call the global cult. And so I have survived all kinds of things through that side of my family, which include being taken to an underground facility in Rome, which, by the way, these exist all over the world, and there's many, many underground facilities and tunnels all over the planet. And I was subjected to torture there and to a lot of MK Ultra experiments. And so when I say torture, I mean things like electric shock, temperature extremes like being locked in a big industrial sized freezer, the usual rape, gang rape, beatings, having to watch the torture and slow murder of animals and other people, being put in isolation, so in certain boxes and chambers where you don't know if it's night or day or up or down for periods of time, having to wear virtual technology goggles and have my helmet on, and so that was part of the MK Ultra. Being having to say into a tape recorder really horrible things about myself and then having that replayed to me over and over with headphones. They're all sort of techniques there. So there was that level of it, and that was really on and off for the first 18 years of my life. And this facility, this underground facility, was connected to the subterranean levels of the Vatican. There was a sort of a train that went between them. So I was taken there, and this would be well below any level of the Vatican that people think they might know about, like well below the tombs and all that. It's really deeply under the ground, and they had a special room with an altar where I witnessed several times babies and toddlers and children be brought in. They would be brutalized severely so that they would release adrenaline, and then they would be ceremonially put on the altar and cut with a special knife, kind of cut from their chin down while alive, and their blood would be collected in these chalices. And there would be VIPs in attendance of all walks of life. And the chalices would be passed around, and they drink the blood. If you go research adrenochrome, you'll kind of discover a little bit about that. They sell it, actually. And they would do these rituals and give these sacrifices in homage to Lucifer, because the Vatican actually worships Lucifer. They're Luciferian, which if you have eyes to see, you can kind of begin to see in all their symbology there. I was also trafficked to different elites, Italian and also in the United States in New York. There is also a big underground area, for example, under the UN, where children are provided for VIPs. I was taken there. I was taken to different parties, so sort of black tie, very high-end parties in beautiful places, and people well-dressed, and then children, including myself, brought in cages. And then the pedophiles, they like their certain age and gender and race of children, so they would have their pick and do whatever they wanted. Sometimes the parties were on grounds, so outdoor during the day. And these were more like hunting parties. So we were sent out as children to run and hide in the woods. And then we were hunted. And then, of course, when you were found, you were raped and brutalized in different ways. And there was always a sacrifice of at least one child at the end. These people who participate in this are the peoples at the highest level of power, wealth, and fame on the planet. If you reach any high level, you're part of this club. You wouldn't get there unless you were. I've seen babies cooked and brought out on platters. These people are Satanists, and so they eat human flesh and drink blood. They're also psychopaths, so they enjoy inflicting suffering. And they're pedophiles. And really, they're also parasitic on an energetic level. So that's kind of the background that I grew up in. And I was able to get out when I was 18. And I went to the United States and I changed my name, and I studied psychology. I ended up working with trauma. No surprise there. So when I was young, I worked in the jails and in the inner cities with homeless and addiction. I worked with domestic violence. I actually worked with the men and did men's groups. I worked with children who had been abused. So I did a variety of that kind of thing, which actually was quite healing for me to be able to help and do something, because I felt so helpless when I was a child with all the people that were being harmed, in front of me, and I couldn't do anything about it. I did my healing work. It took me about 10 years. That was pretty rough to kind of recover from that life. I had a daughter, which really was the best gift I've ever been given in this lifetime. And at some point, I was sort of saying to Spirit, to God, just a frustration that this is still happening. This happens to millions of children every year. Children are kidnapped, children are trafficked through CPS, children are bred for this, children of cult families are sucked into this like I was. So I was saying, what the hell, like this has to stop. And I kind of heard, well, then speak out, share your story. It was pretty terrifying to do that. I remember after the first time I talked about it, I had a big backlash. I had panic attacks. I was sweating, I couldn't sleep that night. But as I kept talking about it, it got easier and easier. And it evolved into me interviewing other people, other survivors like myself, which was for me really amazing to discover that it wasn't just me. There were all a lot of other people who have been through this. And the more I talked to other survivors, the more I recognized there's a playbook. We're sharing the same forms of torture, the same trauma-based mind control practices. So I was putting their stories out. And then it evolved more into also interviewing what I call truth warriors, people who reveal all these different aspects of our society and how they actually truly function. And at some point, it became much easier and even fun to do these interviews. So if people go to my website, it's unbroken.global. There's a ton of interviews, and then I've interviewed healers and consciousness warriors like Penny Kelly and others, and just an effort to put what I think the formula is to break the mind, free the mind, break the mind control. So learn the truth, because our world is a stage and it's a bunch of lies and it's theater. So that's one part. And then I also put out a lot of information on how to heal yourself, because we're all traumatized if we're born on this planet in this time. So how do we put ourselves back together, and how do we come together as a human collective and free ourselves from the situation that we're currently in? And as you know, because you've taken some of my seminars, I do seminars on different topics. I did one on mind control, on the Vatican, on satanic ritual abuse, and I'm going to do more. I have a monthly membership for people. So because at some point, and that was the case for me too, it's hard sometimes to be in the world with people that aren't quite at the level of awakeness, I guess to call it, that we are. And so we get together every month, and it's people from all different countries in the world, and it's just a really nice community, because we need to start building a community with each other. So I have that as an option, and yeah, so that's kind of what I'm doing now. And I trained to become a psychologist, and so I help people, a lot of survivors of SRA, because that's a very particular kind of trauma that the psychological community doesn't know much about, because it's it's hidden. I work with survivors of any kind of trauma, really, so I do that as well.
I would imagine that others who had a similar experience as yours didn't survive.
Oh, yes. Many don't survive.
Yeah.
Many don't survive. And see, in the cult, when they're doing this to us, they don't care if children survive or not, but the ones that do are the ones that they can train for future roles, either on the global stage or as honeypots or assassins or super soldiers. So if you are strong enough to survive that level of abuse, then you're used and you're trained by the cult to be an asset.
Yeah. Yeah. It is surprising, once this information gets into your field, that they've been able to keep it hidden for so long from probably 99.9% of the population. And I think that that's a tribute to the level of mind control that we've all been under. And if you're in the US, which is where I'm located, it is extraordinary the degree to which we've been lied to and misled. I recently took Max's seminar on mind control, which is excellent. I can highly recommend it. And what I can tell you is that although I knew some of the pillars of mind control, this seminar brought it all together in a way that it was just a huge aha for me, to realize the pervasiveness and the thoroughness by which we have been misled. And that's what I want to talk about today, is really hit on the profound level of being lied to while loving the story we're being told at the same time. So I think it's important to kind of peel back the layers and really take a look at what's actually happening on this planet. I think about a year ago, I had said to Penny during one of the videos that she and I did together, I said, humans are so very damaged. And I just noticed that as a personal observation in my circle and the people I'd come across in my lifetime, that there were very, very few that seemed happy, well adjusted, spending their days doing things they loved. They felt valued, they felt engaged, they felt important. So many people have issues, mental issues, or emotional issues, or life issues. And what I realize now, and particularly after Max's seminar, is it's all engineered. We are a civilization on a planet suffering from arrested development. And we have been taught all the wrong things in order to survive on the planet and interact with each other in a healthy, nurturing, growing way. So really where I want to go today, Max, is kind of start from the beginning of what you see as the foundational elements of mind control. And then let's go down the rabbit hole and really kind of unpack and uncover all the ways that we've been manipulated. And I said to Max, and this is for you, those of you watching, I said to her before we came on, I live in the United States. I spent my life feeling so proud to be an American and so fortunate that I lived in the United States. I just felt proud and lucky. And what I understand today is that the population in the United States of America is probably the most mind-controlled population ever on the face of this planet in its entire history. We have been so profoundly set up with lies in every area that now I see it completely differently. And I'm really working very hard to pull at all those strings of misinformation and lies so that I can then view the world without that filter of control. So that's the setup, Max. Where would you like to start on a huge topic?
Oh boy. Well, we can start there. So there is a global cult who runs the world, and they've run it successfully because of secrecy and deception, and keeping us very devolved physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually, precisely because we are so powerful. We are these beautiful, light-filled, radiant beings. We're creators. We're connected to the life force. So they have had to spend a lot of time, resources, money, and effort into mind controlling us, and it's continuous and it's constant, and they've covered every single possible arena of that ever. So the good news is that tells us that actually once that mind control, once we free our minds from that and we rise, we do our healing work and we rise in consciousness and we step into our true potential, they're done at that point. So they have to work really hard to keep us down here and mind controlled, because actually otherwise they have no way to control us and to run the planet the way they do. And you know, these people are parasitic. So because they serve the dark, they're not connected to source, to God, to the creator, to the life force, to the light. So see, they have to use us. Like movies, by the way, are a way that they tell us what they're doing, because per universal law, they have to get our consent. And if you don't say no, it's considered implied consent. So they let us know. So like in the Matrix, Morpheus says to Neo that we're batteries, and that's exactly true. So they're using us so they mind control us, and then they use our creativity to create this hell on earth enslaved society that we currently live in. So that's the good news, because without that mind control and them using us to create their world that they like, which harms us, when we can come together as a human race, we can co-create a heaven on earth. So I'll start there, that this is
Okay.
actually very hopeful.
I want to unpack that for a little bit, because that's something, Max, that I have been mulling over since your seminar. Is I understand they're parasitic, they're not connected to source. We have a greater level of light and thereby creativity, intuitiveness, understanding because of that source connection.
Yes.
So, am I understanding that they program our consciousness with horrible movies and horrible dystopian agendas and television and all that to create in us a narrative, a negative, fear based narrative? And because consciousness creates,
Yes.
when we engage in that storyline that they have spoon fed us in every direction, from the music to the entertainment to the halftime shows that are very satanic, to the television, to the fear based commercials, all of it, we take that in. Our consciousness then creates a scenario with that information, and then that consciousness creates our reality. Is that how it works?
That's exactly how it works.
Okay.
That's exactly how it works. And it's a scientific formula. So if you know anything about the Jesuits or Mengele, these people, they actually worked together. And one of the things that they discovered is that the sexual abuse of a child prior to the age of 5 is the best way to create a future mind-controlled slave, because of the dissociation and the fragmentation that that trauma creates in the psyche. And then when a person is they're in shock and the trauma is overwhelming, the psyche's defense is to split, to repress that. But then there's a blank slate there. So that's what they do. They program. Then so that applies to the collective too. You see some shocking imagery on TV, or there's, or they, for example, blow up the Twin Towers, and that shocks people. And then it's easy to insert the programming, which they want to insert. So it's called trauma-based mind control. But the sexual abuse of children is a particularly good way, and then it becomes generational as well. So every generation in a generational family of sexual abuse becomes more compliant, more pliable, more passive, more easily manipulated than the generation even before. So that's something that they start with right from birth in satanic ritual abuse. In fact, the Mengele, what he brought to the table was that you can start abusing a child even in utero. So this is something that he taught. So you can say horrible things to the fetus, to the woman's pregnant belly. You can play loud, discordant music. You can punch in a certain way that won't kill the fetus. You can insert things into the amniotic sac. And so the torture, so the Jesuits, for example, they will do this kind of torture. And then when the infant is born, which, by the way, they actually they take embryos and they genetically manipulate them to make these more enhanced babies, more intelligent, more physical prowess, etc. And then when the babies, so they implant them in these poor women that they have captive, that then carry the baby to term, and then they will, in a very ritualistic and horrible way, murder that mother in front of the newborn infant. That's the first trauma, right? And then they will sexually abuse that infant right from babyhood. They'll mix in abuse with love, right? And so that's a trauma bond that develops. But in any case, this is their perfected formula. And so these children that are raised in this way, and a lot of, even a lot of people that you see on the world stage would have been done to in this way to groom them for their future roles. So then they program these children have different altars. So that's how they get assassins or super soldiers, or and they have names for the programming, like beta programming is the sex kitten programming. I was put through that. So basically they teach little tiny children how to be sexualized and sexually service adults, because the pedophiles don't want a sniveling, screaming, child to rape. They want one that seems to act like, they like it. So that, and then these honeypots are used for blackmail. They put them with certain important people and get, they get video or photographs. These kind of lone wolf assassinations that we've heard about, like the JFK or the Reagan or whatever, these are MK Ultra people who have been done to in the way I've just described, and then programmed to do this specific task. So everyone has a handler. That's a person that's responsible for overseeing them. And then whenever it's their time to do said task, they get a certain trigger word, a code, a sentence, something that then throws them into that altar that they've been programmed in. They go and they execute that task, right? So,
Okay.
yes, you want
let
probably
me
unpack that a little.
yeah, let me break into that, because this is new information for a lot of people, and it seems almost difficult to understand how it functions. So what you're saying is that when you abuse a child in a significant way, sexual abuse, torture, when they're under 5, what you're literally doing, because that brain is still forming, is you're breaking the natural formation, growth, and maturity of that child. And then they start compartmentalizing the torture and putting it in a box. And then they get the training, and that goes in a box. And then they get the love, and that goes in the box. And none of it makes any what would be natural human sense. So I would imagine that what's left of that child is this fragmented belief system that has nothing to grasp onto.
Yeah, and the strongest of the children that survive that, humans can really, we actually have natural abilities like telepathy and self-healing of our bodies and telekinesis and all this stuff. So any ability can be trained into a child with enough torture. And that's what the cult does. So they're players in strategic global positions. There's no accident. They control it thoroughly and completely. So you could even say that that people up in the hierarchy of control are themselves mind controlled.
Yeah.
And then we are all mind controlled as well. And so I was telling you about this earlier, but I think it's worth mentioning. So satanic ritual abuse is very ancient. It's an ancient cult. It used to, people used to bring their children and sacrifice them to Moloch. And then this child sacrifice cult went literally actually under the ground. So it still occurs today, but it's just more hidden. So that you could say that SRA was the first kind of scientific, so to speak, form of mind control. But then psychiatry came into the picture. So in 1921, the Tavistock Institute came into being, and they were purportedly helping war veterans from World War I with shell shock, which is trauma. But actually, that was BS. They weren't helping anything. They were studying human behavior on a bigger scale, like what happens when we traumatize these men. We send them in and we force them to kill other humans, and war is very, very traumatizing. And so they began to study this. And then at the time of World War II, they brought in psychiatry, okay? So then they began to really perfect this model of mind control. And if you look at their mission statement in around 1945, right after World War II, they said in it that they were going to use future shock to mold people into easily accepting a one world government, new world order. So this has been in the works from just the Tavistock Institute since the mid 40s. Okay. So this is not some new thing. So they brought psychiatry in. And in terms of psychiatry, people should research Edward Bernays. He was Freud's nephew. He's known as the father of propaganda. And he began with the Tavistock Institute to institute advertising, which is another form of mind control, right? And then even Freud, in the late 1800s, I think it was 1896, he put out a paper called The Etiology of Hysteria. Trauma, they called it hysteria, and they thought that women had it because they had a uterus. And he had put out originally a paper saying, that, because he began to talk to women and hear their stories. And he said, I've discovered something. It's actually sexual abuse that's creating this trauma. But that was not well received. So he then recanted and did a huge disservice by putting out the Oedipal theory, where he said, my bad. Actually, children want to have sex with their parents. They fantasize about it. So that's, again, a mind control program. And then add in Kinsey, who was a Satanist. And they're programming the population to believe that children are sexual since birth and all this, because they always planned, and I heard this as a child, they always planned at some point, which is now, to normalize pedophilia, to have Luciferianism as the one world religion, which is the role of the Vatican, okay? And then to basically have a global government eliminate all nations. And we see this happening today. But this has been in execution for a long time, and it involves, and now today with technology added to the psychiatry part of it, it's even more enhanced. The mind control is even more enhanced. So when these smartphones came out, they're a little perfect mind control tool that, now everybody has. And so this is kind of the evolution of it. And there is technology today where they can pulse thoughts and emotions into people. And they've experimented on this, massively. So there's a whole nother big pot of mind control techniques, which, like you said, you heard in my seminar, which I can explain and go into, but I thought, let me just leave that part there.
Yeah. What I'd like to do now is talk about how these techniques that were developed have been utilized to mind control entire populations. So we're not just talking about breaking a child or programming one child. What they have done is that they have perfected these techniques and are now programming entire populations, if not the entire planet. So there's lots of recent events that those of us watching are very clear on because we lived through it. Like for me, the JFK assassination. Then the next big one, probably Martin Luther King or Kennedy, the Robert Kennedy. Then, of course, 9/11, huge psyop. I completely bought into the whole thing. And then, of course, most recently, COVID.
Yes.
That whole thing was completely planned years, if not decades in advance. And then in my mind, most recently, the whole Charlie Kirk thing, total psyop. And Max, when I watched that unfold a little bit, but I ended up backing away from it because I thought everything around that from every angle is a psyop. And I didn't want to get sucked into it. But there were times when I would see a little bit of information and I thought, I wish Max was here because she could unpack that for me and tell me exactly what it was, because you're able to see it because you were behind the scenes. You saw how they put these pieces together. So what I'd like to do now is pick one of those events, whether it's 9/11 or COVID or the Charlie Kirk thing, and let's unpack that from your perspective so that we can see how it's a 360 fabrication that then we get sold. Which one do you think is the most easy
let's
to
do
work
the
with.
Charlie Kirk one just because it's most recent and obviously, but let me explain the playbook foundation for which all of these are based. It's called the Hegelian dialectic, so people can go research that. It's essentially problem, reaction, solution. So they create, the cult creates the problems, like a supposed terrorist attacks airplanes flying into the Twin Towers. That was a hologram show. There were no airplanes. It was blown up from the inside deliberately. So that's the problem. Then they anticipate the human reaction and stoke fear with all the media and repetition, and it's terrorism, it's terrorism. So they have a boogeyman. And then they come in with the solution, which was their intended agenda all along, okay, which in the case of 9/11, which by the way is a satanic ritual sacrifice holiday, the agenda was to pass the Patriot Act to be able to go into these countries where they wanted to do regime change and profit off all kinds of things. And the Patriot Act actually made it legal to harvest our data, spy on us, and designated all American citizens as enemy combatants. So now we can be thrown in the hole, no questions asked. Now, most people didn't know what was in the Patriot Act, didn't know anything about it. They were in their limbic and brainstem. So this is what these people, they know the nervous system. So the fear, the big terror attack puts everyone in shock. When you're in shock, the prefrontal cortex, the thinking part of your brain, shuts down, and only the limbic and brainstem are operant. And because in a real situation of survival, thinking is too costly, it takes too long. So the brain gets ready to react and it does fight or flight, right? So they know this about the human brain, so they're constantly pumping fear. So they create this terror attack, they anticipate the fear, and then they slide in with the solution. Everyone thinks, oh, it's for our safety. That's when the TSA was created. Okay, you and I both remember when we could travel and no such thing existed, right? And then the TSA in and of itself creates a mind control idea that it's normal to be scanned, asked for things, poked and prodded. Then when COVID came, people were more amenable to standing here and going in the line this way and all these, insane rules. So they usually have more than one agenda. And so with 9/11, that's an example that I'm using of the Hegelian dialectic: problem, reaction, solution. So let's go to the Charlie Kirk thing. So politics, we have to understand, is also government itself means, if you take the word apart in Latin, it means control of the mind. So the whole government is theater. It's a sham. It's another part of the mind control system, which has taught us that we must obey authority, and that this entity called government gets to tell us what to do, gets to take part of our income, gets to regulate us and all this. So politics is theater. So we have, in this binary choice that we're presented, is itself a form of mind control. You have either the Democrat or the Republican Party. I call it Blue Donkey Productions or Red Elephant Productions, starring in recent time Joe Biden versus Donald Trump. Okay, so this is also leads to another program that they love, which is divide and conquer. So they mind control us into fighting each other and thinking that each other is the bad guy and the enemy, because of course that serves them quite well.
I want to break in real here for a minute here, because we are so programmed and conditioned in the United States to look up to our leaders. It can be very difficult for someone who has a great moral compass, does the right thing, takes care of their family, goes to work. It can be very difficult for them to understand that we're being played continually by this whole government thing. Can you share with us, and you don't have to name names and that sort of thing, but this is a play because you were in these ritual ceremonies as a child with members of government. So can you give us a little background of, you saw behind the curtain?
Yes, people who are going to be presidents, there's no such thing as us voting and electing them. That's a sham too. It's to make us feel that we have chosen. If you think about it, even the choices we have are selected for us, but people are, who they're going to put in the office is planned way ahead of time. And so there's some that I have seen in the rituals, and I'll name Bush Sr. as one of the most evil, horrifically cruel human beings that I've ever experienced, and I've experienced a lot of them. So all of these people, I would name Hillary Clinton. She is horrific. They're both pedophiles. But honestly, if you're going to be in any presidential capacity, you're going to have had to go through rituals where you rape and sacrifice a child to even be able to be in that office. So there's no good one. There's no good one. It's all fake. It's all theater. And so, with the thing is with Biden, so the people who are on the left, who are progressive and all that, they're good people. They went into that way of thinking and being because they're, just like you said, they're good people. They care about the earth. They care about children. They care about things. But it's been socially engineered to become very communist and in fact very satanic, and they've inserted the pedophile agenda within the whole trans rights agenda to groom that forward. So we had him in office, and then a whole swath of people supported this character, this actor, I'm going to call it. On the other side, on the right, there were people who had woken up to certain things. They understood about child trafficking. They understood about, the word deep state began to be thrown around. I was surprised. I thought, oh, wow, that's coming out in the common vernacular. So what the cult is going to do is when something slips out of their control, they take it and they twist it around to control it again. So what they did is they framed the left as the deep state and the right as the savior of the deep state, starring Donald Trump, who's going to ride in on his white horse and vanquish the swamp and save everyone. And he's playing 5D chess. That's why he hasn't done anything he said. So they took these awake people and they psyoped them into a savior program. And Q was a great example of that. So Q was saying all these things that were true, because the best mind control formula is truth mixed in with lies and inversion. So I remember someone arguing with me and saying, no, Q is real, it's good, because otherwise they wouldn't say all these true things. And I said, yes, they would, because they're trying to capture those people that already know those things. And he said, yeah, but then it'll wake up everybody else. And I said, no, it won't. People who are deeply mind controlled will reject the truth when you present it to them. They will just say, oh, that's a conspiracy theory, so that's safe. So this was targeted at the ones who had awakened to a certain level. And what's the twist? Trust the plan. In other words, park yourself, do nothing. And then they enlist all these people who know there's a deep state, know there's child trafficking, know some of this stuff. And then they're supposed to follow their savior, who's going to actually clean up the deep state, who's part of the deep state just like the other guy was. So that's the mind control psyop, and it keeps people captive and angry at each other. So enter Charlie Kirk. So basically, I did a little research when it happened. Charlie Kirk seemed like a nice conservative guy who would go to college campuses and talk about things. But when I did a little digging, Turning Points was affiliated with the CIA. And I know the CIA goes to college campuses and recruits, right? So maybe that was his role. So in classic, this operative world, what they would do, so then I began to realize, okay, he's probably an operative and his wife is also an operative. And what they do, this is so staged that they will take people and marry them, like bring them together. Okay, you're going to marry this person, and then you're going to be this cute conservative couple, and you'll have a couple of kids, and then they go, so they're basically CIA operatives. So this thing was this all staged, and they have holographic technology that's very, very good. I'll leave it at that. So, he was supposedly shot in the neck and killed, so that now it's they want civil war in America. They want to get the left and the right to hate each other and fight each other. So that was a psyop to further that, and also a distraction for everything else that's going on and all the failures of Trump the savior, that he's not doing. So that's classic. So this guy is somewhere else living his life. I mean, he's not dead. This is what they do all the time. So that was that. The interesting thing to me is that the matrix is breaking down, because right away people were putting out videos of the shot was on this side, his ring was here, and then somebody brought out that there was a movie where the star of the movie was named, the star character was Charlie Kirkland, who had been shot on that same day through the neck at a political event.
Okay, so here's my question about that. And I heard about that and I thought about you. I understand that ritual is very important to, what are we going to call them? The Satanists, the deep state, whatever. Why was it important that that movie came out and then they rewrote the script and did it live in public? Why is that important to their little process?
Well, because again, they have to tell us, it's revelation of the method. They have to tell us what they're going to do. And then they can say karmically, per universal law, oh, well, they knew. I mean, it's not our fault they fall for it and think it's true or real. So they're telling you what they're going to do ahead of time. Apparently The Simpsons, I don't watch that stuff, but apparently The Simpsons has predicted all kinds of things. Well, they're planned ahead of time. They're not, so yeah, I guess they are predicting it in the sense that it's going to be rolled out at some point in the future, but they're letting us know, and they let us know through all kinds of movies. If you go to the UN website and you read like Agenda 2030, I mean, it's all spelled out there what they want to do. It's out there. All the information has always been out there, but we're so mind controlled, we don't see it, or we think it's fiction. And there's another element, which is that they mock us, okay? They think it's hilarious. They laugh. If you've watched, like I've seen clips of talk shows, like Ellen DeGeneres or Obama or Hillary on a talk show, laughing and joking, like, oh yeah, we've had all these pizza parties. We love pizza. Well, pizza is code for pedophiling little girls. Hot dog is little boys. So they're openly, and they have their symbols everywhere, all kind, the one eye, all of it is in your face and out there. And they communicate this way with each other. So it's a symbol communicate. I'm a pedophile, you're a pedophile. But they also like to mock us. They think it's pretty funny. And so I'll give you an example of a mockery. Black Lives Matter. Now, the average good liberal progressive will think that it means people of color's lives matter, which of course they do. Yeah, I agree with that. But that statement is not talking about people of color. The cult could care less about any people. That is the Black nobility lives matter. The Black Sun, which is one of their cult factions. That's what they're talking about. And so it's mockery right there.
And then every time someone repeats Black Lives Matter, that adds energy to that group.
Yes, it's casting a spell. It's the same when they created the fake pandemic and they called it COVID. That stands for Certificate of Vaccination ID, because it was a coronavirus. Where did that name come from? They wanted everyone repeating COVID, 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 because that is spell. It creates a spell. It's a frequency. The repetition helps bring it into existence, and their desire was to create vaccine passports. So if everybody's repeating that over and over, that helps it bring it into actual manifestation in the material plane better. And so unwittingly, people were assisting them. It didn't work, but that would be, for example, another way that that's done.
Yeah, I do think that initially, or at least for what I saw, I was living in California at the time of COVID. People really fell hard for that one. for whatever reason, I didn't. I saw it for what it was from the get-go. And I remember looking out the window thinking, there it is. There it is. People fell hard for that. But I do feel like because they pushed it too far, and there are too many people who've had tremendous health issues as well as death from the shots, which was intentional, that started waking people up. And then what I saw, and I was actually kind of giggling in a way, when the Charlie Kirk psyop was, rolled out, they can't get away with it like they used to, because citizen journalists were all over that. There were people doing sound analysis of the bullet. There were people getting every single video and researching every single frame. So it was heartening to me, because all of a sudden it wasn't this mass compliance of, whoever is on the television telling you you got to be afraid. They're not, a lot of people aren't falling for it anymore. And I was particularly encouraged that so many people have said there's something about his wife that just feels really, really off, which tells me that even if we can't point to what the game is, people's intuition is so much more acute or aware now, because it just feels weird. And that to me is encouraging.
It's very encouraging. And, I was talking about the Tavistock Institute earlier, and what followed from that is the CIA's MK Ultra experiments, and the creation of, Operation Mockingbird, which is the creation of the media. Okay. And that was created to mind control us. Every, reporters, TV anchors, talking heads, all of them were either reading a CIA script or CIA assets themselves. Okay. Like Anderson Cooper is a good example. He's a CIA asset. So even the media was created to mind control, to propagandize. If you go research Operation Mockingbird, you'll be stunned to see how well executed and created it was. But see, what you're saying, and what I think I agree with 100%, is that operation is failing, because people are now not trusting the media anymore. They're beginning to see that it's all manipulation and lies and mind control. And there are statistics out there that viewership of these mainstream media channels is falling precipitously. Now, I will warn that the cult always has another layer of mind control ready for when you wake up to one layer. So the alt media is where a lot of people who woke up to the mainstream went, thinking, oh, this is the truth. No, they're just as controlled, and just as there are all kinds of assets in there to feeding you some truth mixed in with a whole lot of misinformation. You really have to be very discerning. You will extract truths from media stuff, but you have to be very discerning. And you see, once you understand mind control, like you said, you saw COVID right from the get-go. When 9/11 happened, I was watching a football game, I think, with somebody, and I said, oh God, there they go again. And my friend was like, oh, you're such a conspiracy theorist. But I knew, because I've seen this crap for my whole life. So as soon as people wake up to the playbook, they're going to see through all of it.
And you probably saw the machinations behind the curtain as well. Conversations or understanding that, what goes into these kind of operations. And, to add another layer to how complete the manipulation can be, I have heard from another source that the holographic abilities are so advanced that they can literally insert a hologram into our reality, kind of like you're inserting a bookmark. In other words, it is seamless, it is completely believable, and it's completely fantasy. It's completely made up. And then once I learned that, I thought, and you guys, once you start seeing this, it unfolds before you like you can't believe. And you start having these aha moments that are all at once a little bit unsettling, but then they feel really good because you're seeing through, the whole maze of lies. I remember, Max, from, the 9/11, and of course we saw the images over and over and over again on every news channel, on the newspaper. That was back when I used to watch the news and read the newspaper. And I particularly remember people jumping from the towers, and that one where the man was upside down, falling head first. And I thought, I had so much compassion and angst for that person. That's probably not even a real person. That's probably just part of the hologram.
Yeah, and it's complicated because everything is staged. So wars are a global trauma that inflicts that trauma-based mind control that I described they did to me and others as individuals. They're both sides are funded. That doesn't mean that real people aren't murdered in war. Okay, that doesn't mean that it doesn't destroy people's homes and regions, but it's still deliberately done. It's a production. So people died during 9/11, but that was considered good by the cult because it's a ritual sacrifice.
Yeah.
And there were people on the airplanes that they claimed hit the towers because it was holograms. So those people would have been actually kidnapped and taken underground and then either murdered or used for rituals, or horrible things would have probably been done to them, and they would have never been allowed to come back because that was part of the story, right? So no, my loved one died in the airplane. Well, yeah, your loved one died, but it wasn't because the airplane hit the Twin Towers. So there's a mix of the holographic technology and the psyop with the reality of carnage that they do on the human population. So I just want to make sure I clarify.
Yeah, thank you for that clarification. And I also want to point out that, so much of this that they're able to manipulate us with, the stories, rely on two things. The fact that we're very compassionate beings, we're very emotional, and we're very compassionate by nature. Humans are. We want to help, we want to love, we want to nurture, we want people, to have what they need. As humans, that's what we want. And we're also very, very, we have low self-esteem. In other words, the fact that they've gotten us to pay taxes, a significant portion of the money we work for so hard, and to just hand it over to a completely corrupt system. If we had any sense of self-worth or self-esteem, we would have said, this is no. All of us would have said no. And imagine if back in COVID, if all of us would have said, I'm not doing that. I'm not wearing a mask. I'm not doing the 6-foot thing. So much of it is predicated on our lack of interpersonal strength, which is created by continually telling us, trust the experts. You don't know what you're talking about. Look to other people, look to the government. We're going to save you. It's a whole agenda where they create the low self-esteem, where they then utilize our compassion and our emotional makeup to then manipulate us. It's just all such a game. And yes, I have to give them credit. It's been very successful for a long time. I do feel like it's falling apart now. Don't you agree?
Yeah, and that's the weaponization of love. They consider love a weakness. It's actually a strength, but they don't know it because they don't have that capacity. These people end at ego. So there's a service to self path, which ends at which doesn't reach full evolution of the being or enlightenment. And then there's a service to others path, which does. And so these creatures have taken the service to self path, and they have cut off that. I think the soul is connected, through the heart. So they don't have that, but they do know that we do. And they, of course, they weaponize that. That's how they get us to comply with ridiculous things, like, and you're right. It all, though, is based on our consent and compliance, because if people had known, had understood what a PSYOP is and what was really going on during this COVID time, if people had all said, I'm not wearing a mask, I'm not shutting down my business, nothing would have happened.
Yeah, it would have stopped. It could have been stopped in its tracks if everybody just said, yeah, I'm not doing that.
Yes. That's because we actually have the power to change this world. We're being convinced we don't. And that one of the biggest PSYOPs, mind control PSYOPs, is this belief in authority.
Yeah.
And if you want to kind of research that, go look at the 1965 Milgram experiment. Have you heard of that one?
Oh yeah, and go ahead and share it with the viewers, because some people might not have heard of it.
I mean, basically, in a nutshell, they recruited volunteers, and the volunteers thought that they were helping someone sitting behind a panel to learn a task. And they were told that it was an experiment to see if negative reinforcement would help them learn. So if they got something wrong, they had a little dial of shock. They would give them a mild electric shock. The dial went to danger and death. So it was to see compliance with authority. So the person on the other side was in on the gig and would get the answer wrong deliberately. And the person in a white coat, who was the authority figure, would tell the volunteer, okay, turn up the dial. And people would say, yeah, but it says danger here. And the authority doesn't matter. You turn it up. And most people were willing to turn the dial to death. And then the person on the other side would act like the shock was like, like they were foaming at the mouth and whatever. And people were still willing to shock this person to the point of death because an authority figure in a white coat told them. That's a very, very sad experiment. That's what it showed.
Yeah. Yeah. And let's talk about the whole white coat syndrome, because I think particularly here in the US, so much of the population is completely mind controlled by what I call, the medical mafia, which was big pharma, and the Rockefeller medical system. And Max, I think you'll agree, was specifically designed to keep us sick.
Yes.
And then extract as much money as possible on the way to our death.
Yes, if it's still out there and available, I could send it to you because I have a copy of it. There's something called the Secret Covenant, in which they describe their completely disgustingly evil agenda to create the Rockefeller Western medical system, and how they're going to use these things to accelerate our aging and soften our minds and make us sick. And the whole thing was set up to sicken us so that they could profit off managing that sickness, but of course never curing it. And also, as a side bonus, reduce our lifespan, which, if you look today, our lifespan has actually been reduced from several decades ago. So that entire system was created to sicken us. And it's a form of mind control, because a weak body will have a not properly working weak mind. And so it's disgusting, but that's the whole basis of that system. And Rockefeller bought off Congress, created medical schools, gave a lot of money, and made natural medicine, anything herbal, anything energetic, old wives' tales and not true. And people are so brainwashed, they still think this today, right? The inverse is actually true. That's real medicine. And the modern medical model is what's BS. Doctors are, and so Rockefeller would fund medical schools if they taught what he told them to teach. So doctors go in well-intended and well-meaning, want to be healers and help people, but the way they're trained and taught, I mean, there's some good things, but mostly they're manipulated into a model that is not correct. Pharmaceuticals and vaccines are probably the most toxic things you could put into your body.
Yes. And yet we have been so thoroughly mind controlled most of the population to think that that's the only way you can survive. It's crazy. You know, it's interesting is that they used the same playbook when they were transitioning from what I call more holistic medical practices to the Rockefeller system, calling people quacks, discrediting them, mocking them, belittling them, and making it uncomfortable for you to believe something other than the narrative that they were selling you. They used that same playbook for COVID. They mocked and belittled and drug through the mud and took away licenses of the doctors that were actually trying to help people. While they celebrated and gave bonuses to the doctors who were literally killing people in the hospitals with the established protocol that came down from Fauci et al. So think about that, folks. We literally watched doctors like Mary Bowden, who was saving people, have her license revoked, while doctors who were killing people on ventilators and remdesivir given bonuses. And we stood by and watched that.
Yeah, it's a mind control technique called shoot the hostage. So basically, any doctor who stood up and said this is not right, this is not true, was mocked, deplatformed, sometimes gotten rid of, definitely unlicensed. So then other doctors who see that are going to go, uh-oh, I better shut my mouth because otherwise that's going to happen to me. And also licensing is part of the beast, what I call the beast system. It exists so that they can control you. And so whether you're a doctor or a psychologist or whatever, the fact that you have to have a license means then that you have to obey their regulations and requirements, and you cannot be a free thinker and you cannot disagree with the essentially mind control propaganda that they're teaching you and forcing you to subject your clients or patients to.
Yeah. And I think that, you know, when we look at what's happened to the medical profession, there's really been a push to get doctors out of private practice and into hospitals so that they then can be controlled. Because if, you know, the first thing you do when you're a doctor and you get your first position is you go buy a big house and a whole bunch of cars and you got a fancy wife you got to pay for and all of this. So they're indentured servants, literally. They have a huge mortgage, you know, they have a huge student debt. And then they buy all this stuff, you know, the stuff you get, I'm a doctor, and you got the doctor's wife. And so they're beholden to a system that not only taught them the wrong information, but then they converted it into a religion.
Right, that's the new religion is scientism. That was the new COVID era religion. So now don't argue with science. You know, there was nothing scientific about any of that. And, you know, actually I have a friend who's an MD and she was fired because she refused to take the job. But when she was still working, she had a case of someone who came in and to the ER and had died of a heart attack. And she had treated this patient. And then the nurse brought her the thing to sign, and the diagnosis, the reason of death was COVID. And she said, no, that's wrong. It was a heart attack. And the nurse said, I know, but they're telling us to put this as the reason of death. And she's like, what? So she went to the hospital director and said, what's going on? And the guy told her, well, we get $60,000 per COVID death diagnosis. So we're diagnosing every death. There was even a gunshot wound death that was diagnosed as COVID. And then they inflate those numbers, and then that's part of the propaganda to convince people that this boogeyman virus is killing us all. But hospitals were paid a lot of money to lie, and then paid a lot of money to put people, like you said, on ventilators, which would result in them dying. So it is a really disgusting scam, but it also normalized a medical police state.
Yeah, dual purpose right there, dual purpose. So you know, and when I look at that whole COVID nonsense, I see a population with no inner rudder, with no sense of self, with no inner strength and ability to discern. I see a population who just does what they're told out of fear and out of low self-esteem and just a built-in compliance because they feel so powerless, which tells me the way out is not necessarily to battle the system, which I think is a waste of time and a waste of consciousness. It's that it's what you did. It's the inner work. It's the developing a sense of self, developing a strong moral compass, developing the strength to say no when everybody around you is saying, take the jab or, stand in line or walk down this aisle with the arrows, which to me is like, can you even believe that people followed those arrows in the grocery stores?
I deliberately went the wrong way
I
because
did
no,
too. I got kicked out of so many stores during
yeah,
COVID.
me too. But
So
it's these small acts of courage, Kimberly. So, for example, I've been traveling a lot, and in America now, when you go to the TSA to the front of the line before you go in, they say stand here, and there's like two little shoe marks in front of the camera. So I, of course, never stand there. I hand them my passport, and I say, "This is voluntary, isn't it?" And it is. So they say, "Oh yeah, okay, no problem." And one guy asked me, like, why don't you want to have your picture taken? And I said, well, you have my face and you have my picture on my passport. Why would you need to take a photograph of me? And he thought about it and he didn't really have an answer. I wasn't going to school him on the real reason why, because that would have taken too long. But it's a small act of courage because every other person complies, stands there, and has their photograph taken.
I don't even think they think about it. I don't get my photograph taken. I don't go through that. I get my JJ karate chopped every time I go fly. It's, I don't think most people even think about the fact that they can say no.
Yeah. And it's those little things saying no, God, I wish more people had said no during COVID, that would have ended things much sooner. Pay cash when you can. Say no to anything like that. That's infringing on your freedom. I mean, if all of us start doing that, that's what's going to change things because we actually do have that power, but we don't know it. But you are right. There's a large swath of the population that people call them zombies or normies or sheep. And I don't like to be pejorative towards anyone, but it does seem like there's a large swath of people who are completely hive-minded and obedient to everything they're told to do, and they're no longer critically thinking. And that's a problem because, again, the way we get out of this situation is when enough of us say no.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that, I get frustrated as well. And I think it's the small-minded human part of me when I look back at COVID. And I think if everyone would have just said no, we would have eliminated all the stuff that all of us got drugged through. People losing their jobs, people lining up for endless boosters, people not being able to. I mean, imagine all that we could have eliminated if everybody would have just said, yeah, I'm not going to do that. Oh, and what a gift that could have been. But the fact is that I think, or what I think it is most people just don't want the trouble. They just want to kind of live in their own little, place and not have to battle and not have to stand up. They just don't want any trouble. They don't trust themselves enough or value themselves enough to stand up and say, I don't think that's good for me. I'm not going to do that.
The problem with that attitude is that it allows this evil system to flourish and to continue. And it's not going to make you safe to comply because the ultimate agenda, you're not going to like it once you're in a 15-minute city and it's digital everything and you're in a social credit system and you can't say anything that contradicts the narrative, or you can't buy food. I mean, or you're forced to vaccinate yourself with all kinds of stuff, or they take your children just because you won't agree to let them change gender or whatever it is. Like, the world, they're heading towards a dystopian transhuman enslavement agenda that's not going to be nice for anyone. So the people that want to lay low and feel like it's safer to comply are actually helping this future come into being.
Yeah. Yeah. It's that compliance that allows it to move forward, which brings us to, as a psychologist and with all your training and all your background and all your experience, can you give us 3 steps, 3 or 4, that will help all of us? And I think the people watching are probably a little bit more aware and are probably a little bit more comfortable saying, yeah, I'm not going to do that. But it starts with us, you guys that are watching. And when we model healthy self-esteem and healthy boundaries and healthy expectations from our fellow man, when we model that, we then give others a framework to start stepping into their own power. So Max, where would someone start in maybe 3 steps that we could, just all start trying to internalize to create a different narrative?
I mean, one kind of basic thing is take care of your physical vessel, because it's the avatar. It's holding your soul and your consciousness. So this is another form of mind control. So we're so poisoned. They chemtrail us, they fluoridate the water, they give us this crap food. It isn't easy, but find a way to start to eat healthy food. If the best thing would be to grow your own. I remember once talking to Penny and her saying that if you plant something, put the seed in your mouth and then plant it, because then it kind of grows to have the nutrients that you particularly need, right? So that's also a way to shift out of the matrix, because they've controlled the food supply, is corporately controlled. So grow your own, do community gardens. You can grow food in a pot on a balcony. Start to go to farmers markets, support farms, eat healthy food, get enough sleep. In America, we have this culture that is actually so John Wayne and cool to work 18 hours a day and not sleep. No, that's not cool, okay? Sleep deprivation is a form of torture for a reason. Get enough sleep, okay? Go to bed at the same time, get up at the same time, and move your body. Do something, yoga, dance, walk, whatever it is. Take care of that vessel is going to be, it sounds very simplistic, but it's a very profound step. And there's a reason why they've attacked the vessel so ferociously, because that is very significant and important. Then I say, and this is what I've done, become very aware of your thinking, of your behavioral patterns, your mental programs, your emotion, like what triggers you. So I think a really good way is to every day journal for a bit. It helps the hemispheres of the brain work together. And so become your own observer. So do you have certain patterns? Do you tend to assume that the negative immediately, like, oh, the store's closed, oh, I knew it, it's always, what are you saying to yourself? Okay, because words are frequencies, they're spells. And that's why it's, television and all these things are pumping all this, and music has lyrics, and they're pumping all these really negative words at us. So become aware of what words you're using. What do you believe? Because we don't even know. We just go in the world and do this and that, and we're not aware of our thought process of what's motivating us, what's driving us. And if you start to watch yourself, you're going to notice where you're going to be like, oh crap, that's not good. I tend to whatever the pattern is, right? So become very, very self-observant, and then notice what triggers you. Because when you're triggered, what's happened is you've gotten activated, something in the present moment or someone activated something in you, a wound, a trauma that's already pre-existing in you, or you wouldn't be triggered. That's gold. Follow that. When someone triggers you or something triggers you, don't react. Take a step back, sit quietly and go, what did that activate in me? Because if you follow the thread back, you're going to find some trauma, likely from your childhood, something that happened to you. And then you can, a really important thing is sit there and feel it. So let's say it's shame. Someone triggered you, you feel deep shame. You don't need to attack the person that gave you that feeling. That's your feeling. You sit there, and as hard as it is, you just sit there in that shame until it passes through you. It will go, it will move. Emotion, they will move through, right? So we get stuck because we block it, and then we drink and we drug, and we don't want to feel what we actually feel it. Find, how old was I when I started feeling this? Find that inner child in you who's holding that trauma. Let them release it, witness it, hold them, reframe the wrong cognition. A lot of us who have been sexually abused have shame, but you know what? You can tell that inner child, it's not your shame. The perpetrator is the one who should be ashamed for what they did to you. That's not yours to carry. So free yourself, work, just constantly observe all of your patterns and then correct them and make a change. Habits, the brain, it takes 21 days to break a habit. Every time you're in a habit, it's like neurologically in your brain, it creates a pathway and becomes a rut. So if for 21 days you don't go down that pathway, so for me, for example, I have a sugar addiction. So that's my addiction of choice. So if I start eating sweets or cookies and then it becomes impossible. So I have to stop. And I've tried that, for 21 days, all of a sudden you don't crave it anymore, because if you haven't driven down that neurological pathway, it disappears from your brain. And that could be with negative self-talk or smoking or whatever bad habit you've picked up, because any addictive habit is there to make you not feel the traumas that you're carrying. And we're all carrying traumas. So I would say very important to find and heal your trauma, whether you want to go to a talk therapist, whether you want to do yoga, whether you want to do EMDR, it doesn't really matter. Just address your traumas, because that's where they hook you with the mind control. And then I would say learning. We learn something new every day. Like go watch Kimberly's interviews, see what you can learn, read about a certain topic, like expand your mind, because you're and go into finding out the truth behind this completely world staged mind control reality. Because when you free your mind, wow, like anything can happen. Anything is, when you free your mind and you heal your traumas and you are self-responsible, observing yourself. Everyone says, oh, well, this tends to always happen to me. Okay, how am I responsible for that pattern that keeps repeating in my life? That's the only thing you can change. So just have a goal to evolve ourselves, I think, and be the best version of us that we can be, because that's how the world's going to shift.
Yeah, that was beautiful. Thank you, Max. So take care of your body, watch your thinking, and then watch your habits as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. Max, this has been so good. It's like all I want to say right now is, will you come back?
Of course.
I want to keep the conversation going. This is so important. And I do have a few calls for action from those of you watching. First of all, all her links are in the description box down below. Go and follow her on Instagram. It's a little daily or every few day reminder of where we're at and what we need to be aware of. Her Instagram, all her links are down below. And if you want to do a deeper dive, and I can tell you it is so worth the time and the investment, it's a tiny investment. Watch the mind control seminar that Max has on her website, unbroken.global. It took me, I think I watched it in 2 sections because it's a little heavy. it can be a little heavy when you start thinking, oh my gosh, all of a sudden all these random concepts start coming together and I see, oh, this is nuts. But the good news is once you watch that seminar, and I'll have Max back if she's available, it frees us. And the freedom in my mind isn't battling these people, it's rising above them.
Yes.
It's taking our frequency and rising above, because they can't touch us when we're in that God light, when we're in that God space, when we're in that source energy. It almost becomes laughable, the little pantomimes that they do. It becomes, I almost look like it as an annoying, bratty little brother at this point. It's wah, 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 wah. And they're doing all these machinations. And I'm like, yeah, whatever. I'm going to go plant something. So when we all get to that place where we're no longer participating in the game ends. And isn't that what we want? So that we can get our planet back to what it can be, a nurturing, loving, supportive, incredible place of human creativity that will be the envy of the universe. That everyone will think they really pulled it off on that planet. At least that's my goal.
I think that's beautifully said, and I couldn't agree more with everything you said. There's no fighting the system, there's no reforming the system. The system needs to crumble and go, and we need to co-create something completely different, which is absolutely possible. And what anything we create is going to be 1,000 times better than what we have now.
Yeah, it's inevitable, because we are incredible creatures. We have such a connection. We're so creative. We're so loving. We're so compassionate. We have a planet that's beyond extraordinarily beautiful, so diverse, plant life, animal life. We have such a gift that we just need to do that a little bit of rising up, letting go of our traumas, healing our bodies, working together, and then start putting our love and compassion into a system that really is going to grow and blossom from it, not throwing it down a dark hole that we don't need anymore. Yeah. Well, Max, will you come back and see us sometime?
I would be honored to come back as many times as you want.
Yeah, I love these conversations, because in my mind, and I think that you probably will all agree, this is at the heart of the matter. This is why our planet isn't working. This is why every election is a rug pull. Every time we think things are getting better, they're getting worse. It's up to us. There's no savior coming. We are it. The person in the mirror is the savior. So I'm excited about that. And Max, thank you so much for taking your time to give so generously. I'm always so blown away with the heroic journey you're on, and you're willing to talk about really tough stuff at a time where I'm sure you just can get a lot of less than complimentary feedback. So let's support Max. Go to all her links, follow her, take that course. I think you'll really love it on mind control. All right.
Thank you, Kim.